But they do get to work. About half of the people in supportive housing who have come in with addiction problems have employment within 2 years. So we want to look at what the Corporation for Supportive Housing calls a moving on concept, so that you don't continue to give a whole lot of wraparound services to people in supportive housing. You allow them to move on. Give them a smaller subsidy so they can cover their rent, but you don't need all the services. That moves on people and allows the existing apartment to be used for more people. And again, the last piece is rural housing. There's still over 25 small rural counties in New York State that have no housing that's supportive for people in recovery. We've done units. I was the director of housing at Oasis from 07 to 2013. We've done as small as 5, 8 units of supported housing in rural communities. It makes an enormous impact. So what we're asking is, when you guys look at the rollout of all supportive housing, look on the rural side at a model that's scale. Look at how that can be done and make sure that every county in the state has at least one program like this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Krueger has a question, and then I have a comment.
One, I want to thank you, but two. So when you propose supportive housing for women with children who are suffering from substance abuse, and in fact you say that their ability to get their children back from foster care and stay stable is effective, is the model combining family supportive housing into buildings with single supportive housing, or is the recommendation separate buildings?
So most of the housing that has been done for families where the head of household is coming in with addiction issues, trauma issues, all kinds of experiences of abuse, all of that, no. The family housing usually in a separate space to where you're doing singles. There's so much good research that says, give women a choice, and if women have a choice, let's have housing separate from where there's lots of single men also there. It's just a safer, it deals with trauma histories, and certainly on the family side, it works really well to have family housing.
And because there's also been a movement, at least in New York City where I'm from, to expand DV family supportive housing, is domestic violence. Yes. Is there any reason not to think of those two populations together in the same building? Absolutely,
because certainly for women who have begun to struggle with addiction issues, there's like a 90% correlation with their own histories of domestic violence and even childhood abuse. And for those people, those women especially who are dealing with the domestic violence crises, they may not already be really addicted in terms of dependency, but the ability to sort of reach to cope with all of the stuff going on in your life, to take a drink, to do some prescription medications, it's just fraught with so much. So I agree with you. Those issues around domestic violence and histories of abuse, histories of trauma. Trauma is not just military trauma. Trauma is around what you've experienced in your life. So that capacity in supportive housing to have access in the housing, somebody can come to you and be a trauma counselor. Someone can come to you and work with your kids. Someone can come to you and help you connect with the community college 6-month certification program so I can really get a meaningful job. Put it all together in the housing. Don't just tell people, you go to this clinic and this center and, all chasing all around. Staten Island's a perfect example.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'd like to say thank you for your focus on rural areas. It truly is appreciated, and I fully agree with you that there are so many counties upstate that are underserved, and you may have heard me talk to the commissioner earlier today, about the fact that we have this crisis, as you know so well, statewide, dealing with heroin abuse and addiction, and we've dealt with prescription drug abuse, and there's also a rise in crystal meth in rural areas that is a real problem. Last year, we were able to secure capital funding to help convert a part of WCA Hospital, Jones
Yeah.
Hill, in Jamestown. But what the real challenge is now is to secure the operating funds in order to provide the services. It's a great place because it's the upper half of a hospital that's not being utilized right now. Mental health services right there, occupational physical therapy services, other services available. But it's really looking at how are we going to operate and provide these addiction
And
treatments.
that is such a beautiful example of how to repurpose buildings, especially healthcare buildings. In Canandaigua, on the VA grounds.
Which I visited, it's great.
There's repurposing for family and single housing and services for veterans, men and women struggling with addiction and mental health issues. That's worked. In New York City, Health and Hospital Corporation sites, Kings County, CAMBA on Kings County campus has done fabulous housing, and that could be done in other Health and Hospital Corporation campuses.
Yeah, you're so right.
Yeah,
So thank you.
These are great things.
Thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you so much.
Next, Rayon Rasmussen, Legal Services of New York. He is the Executive Director.
Thank you for this opportunity to testify today. My name is Ron Rasmussen. I'm the Executive Director of Legal Services NYC. Legal Services NYC was formed as part of the war on poverty nearly 50 years ago with a mission to fight poverty and seek racial, social, and economic justice for low-income New Yorkers. We are the largest provider of free civil legal services in the country, and our staff of 400 provides services to more than 80,000 New Yorkers, including 25,000 children each year. Thousands of our clients are faced with eviction and foreclosure, and without our assistance, many would end up in the shelter system. As you've heard repeatedly today, New York State is facing a serious affordable housing crisis. Statewide, more than half of renters pay more than 30% of their income on housing. In New York City, almost 80% of low-income households pay more than 30%, and many pay more than 50% of their gross income on rent. More than 80,000 state residents are homeless on any given night, nearly 58,000 in New York City, and 28,000 of those are students. It's inconceivable. The reality for low-income homeowners is equally stark. More than 41,000 new foreclosure actions were filed in 2015, and that's nearly double the number that were filed prior to the financial crisis, so we're still reeling from that crisis. Communities across the state are forced to cope with zombie properties, as you know. Vacant and abandoned properties that, left unrepaired, are sources of blight. And thousands of homes, with many more thousands of apartments, are caught in foreclosure limbo when servicers refuse to modify mortgages that could otherwise be affordable. We have an opportunity now to address these problems. Over the last year, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the FHA have begun to sell distressed loans at sizable discounts to investors looking for a quick profit, and also to some nonprofits and other mission-driven purchasers. This development provides a major opportunity to create affordable mortgage modifications that will allow families to keep their homes by taking funds from the bank settlements to create the Community Restoration Fund. The Community Restoration Fund will purchase mortgage notes on 1 to 4 family homes at discounted rates, either through note purchases or other types of distressed sales. Homes acquired by the fund will then have a range of disposition pathways. Mortgages can be modified so they will be affordable. Homes can be rented to current homeowners with an option to purchase. And local nonprofit development efforts can be funded to restore vacant properties as affordable housing available for purchase or rent. Investing in the Community Restoration Fund now will also likely bring additional funds to New York State. Under many existing bank mortgage settlements, including those that are to come, and there will be, banks have incentives to contribute funds to entities like the Community Restoration Fund. As a result, the state's initial investment can be leveraged with contributions from banks and with returns from stabilized properties, these funds can be used to assist even more New Yorkers. I want to address one other matter that is essential to combating homelessness. As you have heard, and as I noted, rents in New York City are far beyond the means of low and middle income families, leading to increasing rates of homelessness. The city government has made a valiant effort recently to try to reduce that problem by expanding anti-eviction legal services and by providing subsidies designed to place homeless families in permanent housing. But the city can't do it alone. State welfare levels and rent subsidies are far behind skyrocketing rents, and vitally needed state housing subsidies were allowed to expire at a time when they were most needed. The shelter allowance was last increased in 2003, and it was raised only to $400 for a family of 3. That's about 25% of what the HUD fair market rent is for a 2-bedroom apartment, which is $1,571 in the New York City area. The legislature tried to address this problem in 2004 by creating the Family Eviction Prevention Supplement Program, also known as FEPS, that provided increased shelter payments to those families on the brink of eviction. But even those payments, which were $850 for a family of 3, were inadequate from the start. And they're even more grossly inadequate now. They barely cover half of the cost of HUD's fair market rent of $1,600. Inadequate shelter allowances and rent subsidies cause 2 evils: homelessness and the loss of affordable housing. And I want to just emphasize that, because what happens in New York City when a low-income tenant is evicted from an apartment is that the landlord immediately jacks up the rent and tries to take the apartment out of rent stabilization. And one of the questioners earlier asked what we can do aside from creating new housing. And what we can do is try to stop the hemorrhaging loss of currently affordable housing by increasing the rent subsidies that are available. I want to close by quoting Stephanie Meyer, the mayor of Syracuse, who testified movingly about the impact of homelessness at the Chief Judge's 2014 Task Force on Access to Justice. She noted, "How is a child expected to do homework if they don't have a home? How can a child learn when they're worrying about where they're going to sleep that night? And as a parent, how can you help your child with their homework or read to them when you're worried about where your family will sleep?" The stakes are incredibly high, and we look forward to continuing our partnership with you to try to address these problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. Of course, much of it I'm familiar with and agree with. I'm interested in this Community Reinvestment Fund because I think that's a new proposal. Who would take ownership of these 1 to 4 family homes under the model you're proposing?
The fund would take ownership, and the fund would have, powers to presumably legislatively created to direct the disposition of homes.
So you would create a new state entity that would oversee the individual arrangements in the individual homes?
It could possibly be a fund created within an existing agency, but it would be a fund that would have discretely authorized, charge.
There's endless housing programs, particularly in our city. So is there some variation on it that already exists from some other point in history, either within HPD or some other?
There's not another program like this that I'm aware of. The last time that the state was facing a foreclosure crisis of this magnitude was back in the late 70s, and what happened in New York City was that the city took lots of properties through in rem proceedings,
right,
as you may recall. And that is not being proposed these days because I think the city learned a lot from that process. It actually resulted in a lot of affordable housing and helped stabilize the city. But I don't think anybody's proposing that solution at this point.
And there was some testimony earlier about New York State being almost the worst in the country for foreclosures still. And the testifier talked about actually rural New York State as a disproportionate problem. Are we still way behind sort of on the foreclosure issues within the city of New York?
What we're way ahead of is the funding that has been made available to both foreclosure prevention advocacy services and also in mortgage counseling services. And way ahead, there's still a vast need out there. But as compared to other states, there's been a significant amount of attention paid, and there's been a fantastic foreclosure prevention team, if you will, created that works statewide to address these issues, both through substantive legislative approaches and also through advocacy. So there's still a lot of work to be done.
And has anybody else done this or doing this? I mean, you referenced that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mae, FHA are starting to sell the distressed loans. Is there any other government entity who has jumped ahead on this idea?
You know, I'll have to get back to you on that,
Okay.
but I will also encourage you to ask that question of the person who's going to testify after me, Christy Peel from the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. She may have more information about that.
I will do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christy Peel, Executive Director, Center for New York City Neighborhoods. No, it's not wrong. It's counting two different things.
Fair enough.
Good afternoon.
Yes,
Good afternoon.
good afternoon.
My name is Christy Peel. I am the Executive Director of the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. I want to thank Chair Young, Chair Farrell, Chair Little, and Chair Wright, and as well as members of the Assembly Ways and Means and Senate Finance Committees for holding today's hearing and for the opportunity to testify. Hopefully you've gotten a copy of the prepared testimony, and since it's been a long morning into the afternoon, I thought I could make some highlights and as well as answer some of the previous questions about the CRF. So the Center for New York City Neighborhoods promotes and protects affordable homeownership in New York so that middle and working class families are able to build strong and thriving communities. Since our founding in 2008, our network has provided over 40,000 homeowners with free, high-quality housing counseling and legal services. We have provided approximately $33 million in direct grants to community-based partners and have overseen another $30 million in funding. The majority of our work occurs within the 5 boroughs of New York City, but we also operate 3 programs that serve New Yorkers statewide in partnership with the Office of the New York State Attorney General. In the State of the State speech, the governor announced the $20 billion Affordable Housing and Homelessness Plan. We commend the governor for this investment, and we're proud to be a part of the aforementioned coalition of 10 affordable housing groups that have been calling for a 5-year, $4 billion capital plan to address our state's housing crisis. We're really interested to see more details about that. And specifically at the center, we're obviously hoping to see some real detail about how the budget will address affordable homeownership issues. So as others have noted, New York still is struggling with a foreclosure crisis. There's some statistics in there. I just wanted to highlight that the negative impacts of the foreclosure crisis, again, felt statewide, but are particularly harsh in communities of color, which have been disproportionately targeted and harmed by predatory lending. Nationally, half of the collective wealth of African American families was lost during the Great Recession, and likewise, the Latino community lost an astounding 67% of its total wealth during the housing collapse. As others have noted, despite the fact that New York represented only 4.7% of the nation's mortgage loans, our share of loans in foreclosure is 11%. We've consistently been one of the highest states with rates of foreclosure. As Mr. Rasmussen just mentioned, we're still really challenged in dealing with the mortgage servicing issue in New York State and again nationally. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA are selling distressed loans often to non-bank servicers, which is challenging for us. You know, in New York State, we have great regulations as put forth by the New York State Department of Financial Services, but the non-bank servicers don't operate in the same way as some of the bank servicers. So when we see large private equity firms like Lone Star Funds, Bayview Asset Management, and Celine Finance accumulating vast portfolios of distressed properties, we're understandably very concerned. We're also very concerned that these homes are going to be permanently lost from the affordable housing stock, and it seems unlikely that once gone, we'll be able to get these properties back. And I hope that you all saw recently in the New York Times an article about how some of the note purchasers are displacing current homeowners in hopes to flip the properties, as Mr. Rasmussen mentioned, in our parts of the city that have highly speculative real estate markets. So this year's budget presents a great opportunity to help New York's homeowners keep their homes, to support working and middle-class homeowners, and to help New York neighborhoods recover. And we're urging the Assembly, the Senate, and the Governor to pass a budget that will dedicate $250 million in funding over the next 5 years to support initiatives that will provide critical assistance to low and moderate income prospective and current homeowners. We would advocate that $250 million would support the following initiatives, including the Community Restoration Fund. The Community Restoration Fund will strengthen communities throughout the state by deterring speculation and property flipping in low and moderate income neighborhoods, helping communities reduce blight and restoring desperately needed property tax revenues to counties and towns. The Restoration Fund will address diverse community needs. It's really been designed to be able to work in neighborhoods in New York City and in communities across New York State. So we've always been trying to come up with a statewide fund that can address problems in lower value markets as well as competitive markets. And the idea with a statewide fund would be that you could buy distress notes across the state, have some sort of cross-subsidization so that there are benefits returned to all the different markets. A sustainable outcome in a market such as Rochester or Syracuse might look very different from a sustainable outcome in Southeast Queens, in Hollis or Laurelton, or in Staten Island. So the idea is that if you can have a fund to acquire the distressed notes, each community can come up with the right disposition plan, whether it be demolition, acquisition for redevelopment for affordable homeownership, or ideally a home retention option where you can modify the home with the new note owner and keep the current homeowner in place. So that's the concept for the Community Restoration Fund. We started talking about it last year during the budget cycle, and we have gotten some progress locally in the city. We have a very small portfolio of loans that we're working with the city to purchase. This approach has been used in several other parts of the country. New Jersey, notably, has done a lot of distressed note purchasing. National Community Capital has also worked on these in Florida as well, and there are initiatives in Oregon. I believe there's a similar initiative in Boston as well, but there's been a huge campaign of national advocates to make sure that the federal government does not sell these distressed notes right when we're really trying to get through the foreclosure crisis. So it's been, the program has been in development for many years, and we're really hoping that we're going to make some progress this year. In addition, as Mr. Rasmussen mentioned, there's a statewide network of 90 housing counseling and legal services groups currently funded through the New York State Attorney General's Office. It's called the Homeowner Protection Program, or HOP. That funding, as is National Mortgage Settlement funding, is set to be exhausted next year. So we're very hopeful that a 5-year plan would include 3 years of funding for the HOP program. This network of 90 groups has just done extraordinary work, including a number of the offices in legal services of NYC. They're some of the best practitioners in the country. And so it's absolutely a great preservation strategy to continue to fund that network. And I'd just note, as our colleagues at MPC and RPC mentioned, that 3-year funding that you were all able to put in place last year is critical for small and medium and even large nonprofits to be able to operate, as Senator Krueger knows from her experience. Having that funding time frame drop every year makes it really hard to retain great staff. And some of the interventions that we do with existing homeowners are how we are able to preserve affordable homeownership and affordable housing and not have to create new additional units. slightly responding to one of the questions that an earlier member asked. So we would really be pushing for additional funding for services. Again, to support an ask of the NPC-RPC Coalition, we think that AHC should not be decreased in funding. In a huge housing plan, we think funding for repair funds for small homes is absolutely critical in terms of a new intervention that could be approached using public funds to do loan loss reserves, would leverage other private money and maybe make that money go farther. Potentially that would give us the ability to scale and reach a larger number of units and boilers. As we said earlier, you have short-term immediate fixes, but often it's on a home-by-home basis, which is challenging to achieve scale with. We've also seen as homeownership becomes harder for folks to achieve, not only because of suppressed incomes, but also as folks age in place. There's been no cost of living increase in Social Security, so many senior homeowners are aging in place and no longer able to afford their mortgage or their taxes. As a spouse dies, it's a huge challenge, so we're focusing efforts to maintain services for vulnerable homeowners, but also we want to make sure that there's adequate funding to ensure that there are future opportunities for affordable homeownership going forward. Which is why we're advocating for increased down payment assistance funding as well. So I'll end it there, and I wanted to say again, thank you for the opportunity to testify, and welcome any questions.
Questions?
Yes, thank you. So following up on my question for legal services, that we don't think there's necessarily any other government that's already taking on this challenge of basically buying the distressed homes ahead of these private, I don't know what you call these entities that are doing this, private equity firms.
So I would say that my understanding is that in Florida, the state HFA did participate in the deal down there. So there's absolutely a role for the state government to participate in a community restoration fund type of approach. In some cases, it might be the state may have the ability to get the right price from the federal government, although being able to be flexible in the approach and partner with a nonprofit fund is also advisable. I think having a CDFI involved allows additional leverage, additional funds to be raised.
And is there any analysis about how much of a discount these private equity funds are buying these properties for, a statistical average?
There's a lot of data out there. I'll get back with some specifics, but what we've seen is because the private equity funds are able to buy at bulk, they are often able to buy at 50 cents on the dollar. What we're really pushing for is to make sure that either nonprofit consortiums, those in partnership with municipalities or state governments are able to get a similar benefit and not have to pay a premium. Sometimes we've seen some of the nonprofit-only pools or the nonprofit competitions, the ones that are restricted to, Detroit, there was a municipality-only note sale. So sometimes they say because we're negotiating directly with the municipality, we may not be able to give you the same discount that we give a competitive auction winner.
Because there have been, I can't even tell you how many proposals there have been to spend and re-spend the bank settlement funds in this state over the years. But given why we're getting the bank settlement funds, because of violations by banks in their banking practices disproportionately correlated to abuses in the housing finance world, it seems to me, without having done my due diligence yet, that this kind of model not only makes total sense for governments, but also is probably the most correlated use for bank settlement monies to, quote unquote, using the monies as a cure for what caused the problems in the first place. So I'm fascinated with the proposals, and I appreciate several of you testifying about it. I'd love to sit down and talk to you more afterwards.
That would be wonderful. I couldn't have said it better. We really think it's imperative that the funding be returned to the communities and homeowners who have been the most directly impacted. And I think that having that flexibility to craft tailored solutions that work for both rural communities, urban, upstate communities, as well as downstate is really critical. And I know that Senator Savino has been paying attention to the zombie issue as well. There's hopefully an opportunity to be able to get some of those vacant and abandoned properties taken care of as well.
Thank you.
Question, do you have a way of, do you know whether it's been federal banks that have been getting hit, or has it been the state banks? In other words, where the people's houses are being taken? Because I remember back in 2005-06, New York State put in a lot of strict rules, especially in Brooklyn, because they were walking in and selling people things that they didn't know what they were getting, and all of a sudden they foreclosed on them. But we put them there, and of course all of the banks left the state. Right now we've got about 3 of them that are state banks. The question I'm asking is it the federal banks, having not the control we had, are the reasons why these people are getting caught in the problems? Is that a question you can understand? I couldn't
yes,
understand.
I think I would first congratulate the legislature on the New York State's banking laws. They're some of the best in the country. They're very well written. The regulations that DFS enforces are very smart and really attack the problem. The servicing industry is really challenged in their ability to comply with that. Often the national banks and the state banks have different entities performing their servicing, and there are different entities who are negotiating with homeowners in the settlement conferences, in the state-mandated settlement conference parts. So,
but do you know, do you have a chart that has the differences or anything?
I can look at it, but my belief, and this is, I'll try and back this up with data, is that it's the servicer that often drives the outcome rather than the underlying bank or the originator that gave the mortgage. They're the ones who have the authority to go in and settle with the homeowner, and often it seems as if they are not settling in the originating bank's best interest from our perspective. We often see homeowners who come in to the settlement conferences with money that's been saved up. They're ready to make a deal. They really want to save their home, and for whatever reason, those negotiations fall apart. So I'll definitely look into the differentiation between the state and the national banks, but my gut is that the culprits are in the servicing shops.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Senator?
Oh, sorry. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay.
No?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. To close, Edward Uberia, local initiative support. Yeah, we lost our banks because we clamped down on them. They got in trouble. That's how the numbers made them. Of course, 2008, we didn't get it.
Good afternoon, Chairman Farrell, Senator Krueger, members of the Joint Fiscal Committee. My name is Edward Ubiera. I'm the Director of Policy for the Local Initiative Support Corporation's New York City program. I'm submitting this testimony on their behalf. I realize it's late, so I will just focus on the highlights. LISC is dedicated to helping nonprofit community development corporations transform distressed neighborhoods into sustainable communities of choice and opportunity with good places to work, to do business, and raise children. In New York City alone, LISC and its affiliates have invested over $2 billion, leveraging over $5 billion for low and moderate income neighborhoods, resulting in over 36,000 units of affordable housing and over 2 million square feet of retail and community space. As we've heard today from many speakers, we have a housing crisis that is being felt broadly by all. Renters, seniors, homeowners, residents of public housing, shelter residents are all facing new and extreme pressures. LISC is proud to be part of a coalition of 10 affordable housing groups calling for a 5-year, $4 billion capital plan to address our state's housing crisis. The core of our proposal reflects the use of settlement funds for new and additional programming vis-a-vis supportive housing, senior housing, foreclosure prevention, and an increase in HCR's traditional production programs like the Low-Income Housing Trust Fund, Homes for Working Families, and the State Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. We applaud the governor for announcing a $20 billion comprehensive multi-year affordable housing and homelessness plan. We believe that the plan is a powerful and affirmative recognition that many New Yorkers are in critical need of housing stability. Over the next 15 years, it is expected that the plan will result in 20,000 units of supportive housing. We are hopeful that this commitment, combined with that of Mayor de Blasio's 15,000 unit commitment in New York City, will result in over 35 units of supportive housing in New York State. LISC and our coalition partners have pledged to work collaboratively with the governor and the state legislator to ensure that new initiatives address the most critical gaps in our housing ecosystem and achieve maximum impact. As the programmatic specifics of the Housing New York 2020 plan are further discussed and finalized, we urge the legislator to ensure that the final plan includes the following: flexible and proactive preservation financing tools to extend affordability of projects whose subsidy or tax credit commitments are expiring, robust production targets for senior housing, sufficient funding to stabilize low and moderate income homeowners facing foreclosure, a clear framework for how HCR and New York City's housing agencies can effectively coordinate efforts in creating a robust supportive housing pipeline, a solution to address the ever-increasing capital repair needs of our public housing authorities, particularly in NYCHA, and finally, an increase in the amount of private activity bond allocation devoted to local housing needs. In regards to the housing bond issue, many nonprofit and minority and women-owned developers of affordable housing have reached out to LISC with concerns surrounding proposed changes in how bonds are allocated for local housing needs. The process to develop affordable housing is complex and very time-sensitive. Predictability is very important. It could become very costly to hold on to undeveloped sites indefinitely. Investors and lenders expect certainty. Nonprofit and minority and women-owned developers are least able to bear the cost and the risks of additional layers of approval, as have been discussed by other speakers. We urge the state legislature to support an oversight structure that preserves the flexibility of local agencies and developers to operate nimbly and efficiently within the bond market. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
No, I appreciate you being here today. I appreciate our recent conversation.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Senator
Do me
Kruger.
a favor when we close, just a minute.
Sure.
We now adjourn. Hearing tomorrow begins at 9:30. Can we go off the air, please?
Thank you.